Sifter for the ear.
News, interviews, reviews, cinema, TV, streaming. Action.
Hi, y'all. This is Jerry Williams, a.k.a. TV Jerry. My podcast with the director of The Levies of Monticello documents the Jewish family that owned and renovated Jefferson's Charlottesville home for 90 years. The director just let me know that if you didn't see it at the Jewish Film Festival, it's now available streaming. And I'll include a link to the options on the original webpage for his interview, as well as the page for this show. I'll also include a link to my show with Cheryl Miller from CBS 6 about the annual Christmas parade, which takes place this Saturday, December 2nd.
Wonder Woman 1984 was being filmed in D.C. And it was the scene in that movie where there's the big chase going on. So every Crown Victoria on the East Coast was in D.C., and there weren't any to make this TV show. Well, we had one.
Find out what happened in today's interview with Brian Rhodes, who owns antique and classic automobiles in Stanton. He rents old cars for movies and TV shows and has stories about that and other interesting information about what makes an antique car.
Sifter Review of the Week.
Faraway Downs on Hulu. Baz Luhrmann directed the feature film Australia in 2008, and it wasn't met with great reviews. He's reworked that movie into a longer 6-part series with episodes ranging from 24 to 49 minutes, and it's much improved. Nicole Kidman plays a proper British lady who travels to her husband's ranch in Australia, only to find him dead. In rides Hugh Jackman, who plays a drover to help her drive her cattle and save her land. This has all the elements of a classic big-screen epic: excitement and peril, gorgeous landscapes, inevitable romance, villainous conflict, and political controversy. Luhrmann has staged it in the style of period widescreen Technicolor adventures, with dramatic lighting, bold colors, and theatrical angles. Kidman proves a comic delight in the early scenes, and Jackman plays the typical rough guy with aplomb. While I didn't love the original, this version truly is new and improved. It's an ambitious series with all the right elements to create a grand and thrilling romantic adventure. I gave Faraway Downs 4 out of 5 stars. So, Brian Rhodes, what was your first car?
My first car was a 1972 Chevrolet C10 pickup truck.
Oh, okay.
My grandfather bought it brand new in 1972, and I learned to drive on it when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
I like to say I've driven it every day of my life since I was 16, but the real truth is I was off in the Navy and whatever like that, but I still drive it every day.
Wow.
So it's one of those where I can't get away with any buffoonery in town because everybody knows that truck.
I guess so, yeah. It kind of stands out. Now, I know, obviously, the business that you own now is called Antique and Classic Automobiles. It was originally Bruce Elder's. How did you get involved in that?
You led into this great, Jerry. You probably didn't even know this, but
Okay. Of course I did.
One Sunday morning when I was 14 or 15 years old, my mom and I were coming back from church. We were coming through town,
Right.
and sitting out front of his shop was a red 67 GTO.
Uh-oh.
And I spotted it from
sure.
2 blocks away. Mom swung in, and we talked to Bruce for a moment, and Bruce said, well, why don't you get his dad to bring him back down here and we'll look at it. So Dad and I went back down a little while later. Now, my dad was, even in those days, was a curmudgeon's curmudgeon. He immediately told Bruce, I'm not going to buy it.
Right.
And Bruce said, that's okay. And I looked at Bruce and I said, I want to work for you. So when I turned 16, I showed back up that very next day. I turned 16 on a Friday. And on Saturday morning, I was standing on Bruce's doorstep when he opened the door. What we did from that point on was I worked for Bruce on Saturdays in the summers and in the fall kind of thing. That very first weekend, I got my nickname, which was the Fine Young Lad, which you will hear folks to this day refer to me as the Lad. Bruce.
Oh, but you're not fine and young anymore.
I'm definitely not young. I don't know. The fine part was always questionable. And so when my wife and I returned to Stanton, she retired from the Navy and I transitioned to the reserves. I came back to be, that was almost 10 years ago. I came back to be Bruce's full-time assistant. And when he passed, I took over the dealership. I operated it right there where his building, in his building for the last 2 years until about a month ago. I just moved into my own building.
Surprise guest drop in.
Tom Cox.
Ah, Mr. Cox, how are you?
Well, lad, how are you this morning?
Listen there, he called you lad, didn't he?
There you go. I just told Jerry the story of how I got the name of the lad.
The lad.
Footnote.
Tom Cox is a two-time national president of the Antique Automobile Club of America and president and co-host of The Appraisers TV show. So, Tom, tell me about your first impression the first time you met the lad.
You know, it was probably, I'm going to say, 20 years ago, maybe. And Bruce was working with a movie car wrangler named Gary out of Georgia. They were getting ready to film the movie Hearts in Atlantis.
Footnote.
Hearts in Atlantis was shot in Virginia in 2000, and it stars Hope Davis and Anthony Hopkins.
The director had determined that they needed a hero car for Hope Davis, the heroine, to drive. And it had to be a 59 or 60 Rambler, and it could not be black or white. And it just so happened that a good friend of mine, her grandfather had owned a Nash dealership in Harrisonburg, just to the north of Stanton. And it had just been painted. It was in blue, and it was not quite finished. It still had upholstery work to be done, and it still had chrome work to be done on the bumpers. We got the upholstery done. We got the chrome work done, and then we had it shipped up there to Stanton, to Bruce's place. And that's where the lad came in. And we started working on detailing everything, getting it ready, and getting it running. So we got it there. It's all last minute. We're working until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, trying to get everything to go. And it won't run. Finally, I threw in the towel about 1:30 and said, look, I'm going to drive all the way back to Roanoke, which was about 2 hours away. Pull the carburetor. I had a new one on the shelf. New old stock, and got back to Stanton at about 6 a.m. and put it on there, and we had the car running well at 6:55, and they picked it up at 7 a.m. So,
wow.
I mean, all of us worked all through the night to get that car out there and get it done.
Well, what do you remember about that, Brian?
So at the time, I was still at Virginia Tech. He called me, and he's like, I need you to come up here and help me. We got to put a car together. Can you come up? And I said, I'll be there. I remember fighting with putting a roof rack on the thing. And when you see the movie at the very end, they drive away with a bicycle attached to that car. And it's the bike that's the whole point of the movie that he sees through the window. I remember being there until late in the night. I wasn't there for the completion the next morning. That was an interesting night. That was my first real taste of the movie car world with Bruce.
The lad carries on, and we appreciate that.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom.
Good to see you, Tom. Come up and visit, my friend.
We'll be there. Take care of yourself now.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now, you said classic cars. I know I've seen cars driving around town with that black license plate that says classic. How old does a car have to be, and what's involved in actually owning one of those license plates?
In the state of Virginia, which you and I speak to,
right?
It's 25 years old. When you place antique plates on a car, if you can find a 1972 and prior, you're allowed to put the year of your car. So in my truck's case, I can put a 72 tag on it. And if you're post 72, 73 and later, you can use either the orange and blue antique plate, and then the black and white one that's just the standard square one that says Virginia Antique. That is a replication. That's the porcelain tags that were issued by Virginia beginning, I think Virginia started in 1906.
Wow.
And there's a form you go to the DMV and fill out, and it has all of the list of restrictions. The short version of that is it's to and from car shows, your mechanic, within 200 miles of your home, occasional pleasure use. The thing of it is that you can't register a car as an antique unless you have another car registered as a regular car.
Oh, wow.
Because it's not intended to be daily driven as an antique.
And it's funny you mentioned 25 years, and you said earlier the 90s. I thought, yeah, well, 90s are antique cars now. That's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Right now. That's right. It's 25 years old. That's the rule.
Right.
That means your 1997 Toyota Camry
is an antique.
Eligible for antique plates.
Right.
If you are willing to restrict your Camry to those restrictions we were talking about, then
cool.
That's the way the law works.
Now, of course, this podcast is about movies and TV, so I want to pivot over to the movies and the work you've done on that. First of all, what's involved in renting cars for movies that people may not be aware of? Obviously, somebody says, like the story we heard, if they need a Nash Rambler, you got to find that car. But what are some of the things behind the scenes that go on that are surprises, or maybe something that surprised you when you found out?
Well, like in the Hearts of Atlantis, I remember the prep up to that movie. Bruce worked closely with Gary and another car wrangler who lives down in Richmond. There was a 4-door car that he had in the showroom, and it was yellow when it was in our showroom. And they wanted that car black. And Bruce said, the only way we can do that is if the production company buys the car and they can paint it black. And that is exactly what they did. I tell you that story because we fast forward 20 some years to a movie that Bruce and I did a couple of years ago.
Footnote.
The Man Standing Next is a Korean political thriller that's currently streaming on Hulu.
They wanted a mid-70s Granada or Monarch, which those are the same car. We happened to know a guy with one and were able to connect them, and they wanted to paint that car. Bruce, said impossible. And in this case, the car was never going to be available. He was never going to part with it and never going to paint it. And they had one that was a stage car in another part of the world where they were filming. And ultimately what they chose to do was to take the stage car that the production company owned and turn it into the car that we loaned them. So
what do you mean by stage car?
The cars that are in the movies are kind of divided into 3 sections, right? Background cars that guys like you and I own and the production company pays us. Cars that are going to be semi-star cars like Tom was talking about with the Rambler, where it doesn't make financial sense for the production company to own it. It makes more sense for them to just pay a little bit more like we did with the Rambler to get what they needed. And then there are the cars that are significantly used on film that are often referred to as star cars, and many times there's multiple versions of them for different purposes, and most of the time the production company owns that car, and that's because they have purpose built it for that particular scene that it's going to be in.
They have to rig things around it or on it.
Right, like the Trans Am in Smokey and the Bandit, they know they were going to destroy it, right. And so you and I aren't going to loan them a car that they can destroy. Right. So they've bought it, they've built it, and the most famous iterations of those were always, the one that anybody knows is the Dukes of Hazzard. As I recall, there were 2 star cars. John Schneider owned one of them for many, many years, sold it a few years ago. Huh. In the 70s and the early 80s, there were guys who traveled the United States and bought 68, 69, and 70 Dodge Chargers.
Just for that show.
Just for that show. And what they would do is they pull them on the lot of Warner Brothers. They would paint them orange. They had a sticker for the flag on the top. They had a sticker for the 01 on the side. They'd move the battery to the trunk. They'd gut them, stick a roll bar in it, and then jump it, and then take it to the back lot and use it for parts.
Now, you said a stage car. I'm assuming that means maybe it's one of the ones that's on a sound stage that they do process work on.
And they can do process work with it. They may drive it, but, those scenes where you see them sitting in front of the green screen, you go,
right.
riding down the road.
So you got some other cool stories about some of the other movie experiences you've had with cars?
I guess the only other crazy one I have is there's a TV show for Investigation Discovery.
Footnote.
Investigation Discovery is a pay network dedicated to true crime documentaries.
It's that typical, they're telling the story, so then they reenact it when it happened kind of thing.
Sure.
We had a 87 or 88 Crown Victoria police car. Very, very common. There are lots of them out there.
Sure, yeah.
The problem was they were filming it at the time. Wonder Woman 1984 was being filmed in DC.
In DC, right.
And it was the scene in that movie where there's the big chase going on. So every Crown Victoria on the East Coast was in DC, and there weren't any to make this TV show. Well, we had one, didn't run. It was icky. And Bruce and I dug this thing down off the 3rd floor, cleaned it up. We even made it run. And I took it to a day of filming in Richmond. And in the process of doing all this, another company called, and they wanted a truck from the 20s for a TV show they were filming in over next to Charlottesville. And so in a 36-hour period, I did 2 TV shows with 2 different vehicles that came from us. Everybody was happy. It was a lot of fun. I ate well. That's the thing, is when it's yours and you bring it over there, they do feed you pretty good.
Right.
You know, it was funny because therefore in an 18-month period, we did a whole bunch of Hollywood. And since then, I've only had 2 calls. And in both cases, I didn't have the car that they needed.
Right. It always kills me. I just saw a movie last week where they did it. People out wandering. They did it in The Last of Us, a bunch of movies where they're wandering the woods and they find this old car in a garage. They pull the tarp off of it. They get it and drive it away. Of course, it's been sitting there for 10 years. You're like, okay, really? Come on.
Really, yeah. People have always looked for a mistake on films, right? There's always been those people doing that. But if they want a movie to be credible, you better stick with what you can make credible. So there's some suspension of disbelief, right? That has to go on with the pulling of the tarp in some cases, kind of things. The Fast and the Furious, they're flying cars and everything, space cars now or whatever, right? All right, we got to suspend disbelief for that one. But at the same time, you have a movie that is a period historical piece, and if it's set in 1957 and there's a 1959 car in there, there's arguments to be made. That takes away from the credibility of the movie.
Well, and it's interesting too. I heard somebody say years ago about cars in the background that, just because the movie is set in 1959, all the cars don't have to be from 1959, obviously, because they wouldn't all be from the same year. So they could be from 1952 or whatever.
If you're filming a movie that is set in 1978, well, it's easy to find Camaros and Mustangs and Corvettes.
Right.
But in 1978, not everybody drove a Corvette and a Mustang. So when you need the background of the neighborhood, you need the big old rusty boat from 1970, and you need that 59 car that the little old ladies down the neighbors driving, and the pickup trucks. So that's what really lends authenticity to these movies, is the background cars.
Yeah. You're still a pilot? I know you had a pilot's license. Of course, you were in the Navy. Do you still have a qualified pilot's license?
I do not fly anymore. I aged out of that. I'm still a drilling reservist. And so I fly a desk like a champion now.
Yeah. So when you're watching a movie, especially a period movie, are you busy looking at the cars the whole time, or can you actually relax in it? I figured as much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bruce worked hard. So he deserved that point in his life to go upstairs earlier in the evening if he wanted to. And he got into a tradition of going up so that he could watch. He watched a little Hawaii Five-0, but he loved to watch Adam 12.
Right.
Just to watch the cars.
The old cars, right?
Yeah. And I'd come up with it, especially in the winter. I'd come up and sit down with him, would watch part of an episode of Adam 12 with him. It was, we would always play the game. That's this, that's that. That's
yeah, I'm sure. Before I ask you my last question, is there anything that you think listeners might find interesting about car rentals for movies or TV shows that you haven't had a chance to mention?
I think I gave you my whole spiel, especially that important part about make sure you get the insurance if you
Right.
are the person loaning the car.
Yeah.
And a good car wrangler knows that.
Moving beyond Adam 12, when you have a time to just sit around and not deal with the cars, what do you like to watch?
The old saying, and Bruce and I used to laugh about, what do car guys do when they go on vacation? They go look at cars.
Of course,
Right. So I'm a news junkie. So my evening when I get home is 5 days a week. Dinner is at the table I'm sitting at right now. All of us, wife and 2 kids sitting around it. It's very much TV off when we do dinner. And then after dinner, the girls can do their thing. And I'm a news junkie and I get about 2 hours of news in. And oftentimes right now with buying a building and restoring a building, after my youngest goes to bed and I kiss her goodnight about, 8:15, 8:30, I'll go back to work for a couple hours. That's just how it goes.
It's good and bad that you go back to work late at night, but one of these days you'll get to Bruce's level where you'll be able to just check off earlier in the day and not worry about it like that.
Someday I'll get myself a lad.
There you go. Get yourself a lad. That's great. All right. Well, I want to thank you again.
It's my pleasure. Please come visit. I'd love to have you and walk you around my showroom.
In my Tesla.
Hey, as the historian in this racket, I'll tell you, I hear people talk about love or hate on electric cars, right? I often remind people there was a period of time in this country where there weren't automobiles. And in that time period, there weren't gas stations and service stations and tire repair and engine repair. And yet, there were people in those days who said, you're never going to replace the horse.
Right.
It took time. And that's what will happen with the electric
EVs,
You're not going to replace. There's still people with horses. There's still people who enjoy the pleasure of horses. There's still people who use horses for work and show and fun.
Right.
But necessity is the mother of invention. And there will be charging stations.
Right. Yeah.
It's the way of the future.
It is. I love it. Well, Brian, thanks again. And good luck with your next. Good luck with all your cars.
Thank you very much, Jerry. This has been great. I look forward to having you pop in to seeing me up here, and maybe we'll find another good podcast to chat about sometime.
Good deal. Thank you so much.
Take care.
That was Brian Rhodes, who owns antique and classic automobiles in Stanton. He rents old cars for movies and TV shows, and there's a link to his website on the webpage for the show at tvjerry.com.
Coming soon. In theaters.
Dream Scenario, yet another Nick Cage film where he plays a family man who starts showing up in other people's dreams. Silent Night, from action director John Woo and the producers of John Wick, comes this holiday-based film starring Joe Kinnaman as a father who revenges a gang attack on his family. Teddy's Christmas, another holiday movie, revolves around a girl who wants a teddy bear and discovers a fantasy. The Shift, after meeting a mysterious stranger, a man must escape a dystopian world to return to his wife. Godzilla -1, yet another Japanese import featuring the classic monster. Holiday Twist, a woman copes with being a mother, having a career, and Christmas.
TV and streaming.
Candy Cane Lane on Prime. Eddie Murphy makes a pact with an elf, Julian Bell, to help him win the neighborhood Christmas decorating contest. Family Switch on Netflix. There have been body switch comedies before, but this one involves the entire family, starring Jennifer Garner and Ed Helms. American Symphony on Netflix. A Year in the Life of musician John Batiste. The Artful Dodger on Hulu. This series follows the life of the adult version of the famous Dickens character from Oliver, as he tries to stick to his career as a surgeon. Pentatonics Around the World for the Holidays on Disney. This popular a cappella group finds themselves in a magic mailroom that takes them on a tour of holiday traditions around the world. Do you know what an assistant director actually does? What's a second AD and third AD? Well, next week I'll be talking with Catherine Hattam, who's been an AD and a producer, and she'll help explain what all these ADs mean. This is Jerry Williams. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
For more Sifter, including literally thousands of reviews,
Visit tvjerry.com.